Good afternoon. I'm Tony Diver, the Telegraph's Associate Political Editor.
And I'm Sam Brodbeck, the Money Editor.
It's Budget Day, one of the biggest days in the political calendar, and the Chancellor Rachel Reeves was already expected to announce a string of tax rises.
And now we know she definitely is.
In a bizarre twist, the OBR, the UK's public spending watchdog, has accidentally published its report, which contains all of Rachel Reeves' announcements.
Now this is pretty unprecedented. The Chancellor normally gets their big moment to reveal their policies themselves. But we now know that taxes are going to go up by £26 billion by the end of this Parliament. And the three big things we want to mention straight away: £8 billion through income tax, a new high-value council tax surcharge on homes worth more than £2 million, in other words, the much-feared mansion tax, and a pay-per-mile charge on electric vehicles. Tony, is your phone blowing up?
Of course. What is going on, Sam? This is so unprecedented. The OBR does not leak. If we ever hear about anything that's going on in the OBR's report, we hear about it via leaks from the Treasury. What doesn't happen is the UK's rigorous public spending watchdog publishing its full report containing every announcement from the budget 45 minutes before the Chancellor stands up. I mean, this really is an extraordinary thing to happen in Westminster, and an extraordinarily unfortunate thing for Rachel Reeves, who has now got no prospect of pulling a rabbit out of the hat that could be popular with the public. We now know everything that's going to be in it.
That's right, and I mean, we don't know, I haven't seen any rabbits yet, and it all seems quite like bad news for pretty much all of us. I mean, they backtracked, didn't they, from an initial thing of maybe we'll do a big income tax rise. Now it looks like there's 12, 13 smaller taxes that pretty much hit everyone. I think the big one we were expecting was this income tax freeze, which means we'll be paying between 8 and 10 billion more, maybe by the end of the Parliament. That does pretty much affect everyone. We got cars attacked, we got property attacked.
That income tax freezing of the thresholds is always a tricky one, isn't it? Because the public don't necessarily notice as much as putting the rates up, but it does have an impact on people's finances month to month.
That's right, and in the manifesto, of course, they said they wouldn't change the rate of income tax. This is going to raise more income tax, but it's going to do it in a quite sneaky way, so we often call it a stealth tax because it's freezing thresholds, which sounds incredibly boring, but it means over time, as you get a salary increase, you trip over the 40% tax band or higher tax bands, and the net effect is the same. Would you think this means you can get away with saying, I haven't actually broken the manifesto, even though perhaps the spirit has been broken?
I think that's going to be the debate over the next few days, because the Conservatives will of course accuse her of breaking her manifesto pledge. At the time, last year, Labour said that they wouldn't raise taxes on working people. At her last budget, the Chancellor did suggest that freezing the thresholds would be counted as an extra tax on working people. Going out on the broadcast round this morning, the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, Darren Jones, said that actually that wouldn't count as a manifesto breach. So I think there's going to be a lot of debate about that. Whether or not that will be the takeaway from the public, I don't know. But let's talk a bit about this EVs tax as well. We were expecting something on that,
Yep.
But why is she choosing to do that now? I thought the government was trying to encourage people to drive EVs.
Well, that's what's so fascinating, I suppose, about it. On that one hand, you have government subsidies to buy a new EV, but the reality is, because people are making that switch, and because fuel duty has been frozen for so long, the amount the government takes in from you filling up at the tank has been dropping, and it's a huge contributor to government resources. And I think the times it's come now that they have to tax EVs a little bit more, otherwise they'll run out of money pretty quickly when we've all made that switch. It's just one of these things that seems a bit odd, where you're sort of pushing people on the one hand and then taxing them on the other. So, I mean, who knows? It may well slow down the uptake now, which should have the opposite effect, presumably, of what they want.
Well, the funny thing about it, I was just reading in this very helpful OBR report that's been published well before the budget started, that she's also going to freeze fuel duty again. And fuel duty has been frozen for a long time. It was first frozen by the Tories about a decade ago, wasn't it? And it's something that chancellors basically have to do. But it is interesting that she's taxing these green vehicles now more than she will be taxing people at the pump.
Yeah, this is the reality, isn't it? I mean, it would be interesting to see what. I would like to know what you think, actually. You know, Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, his job is to push us towards net zero. I don't know if this is another example of maybe some conflict within the Treasury and within sort of broader government.
Yeah, well, as some of these reports started to drop last night and we started to get a clearer idea of what actually was going to be in the budget, I had a conversation with a few people in Whitehall trying to get a sense of what the personalities are saying about this, because, you know, as the government is fond of saying, budgets are all about choices, and there are all these different departments lobbying for what they want. Ed Miliband is lobbying to raise as much money as he possibly can from net zero levies on energy bills. and that's money that he can then spend on giving people subsidies to put heat pumps in their homes or whatever it is that DESNZ wants to spend their money on. I heard that there were some very robust conversations, was how it was phrased to me, behind the scenes, which is, of course, government speak for a huge row over what was going to happen in this budget. It sounds like we're probably going to see lower levies on energy bills because the government is trying to frame this budget as a cost of living budget. That's the number one political priority. And Keir Starmer told the Cabinet that this morning. We had a readout just now of what Cabinet ministers were told. So that, for bill payers, will be a good thing. The Fred Miliband is a very bad thing because it means he doesn't have as much money to play with unless they can find some money out of general taxation somewhere else to try and fund those kinds of subsidies. But it certainly sounds like the personality politics at the top here is not a completely united front. There is some division in the Cabinet over exactly how these kinds of choices are being made.
And just go back to the leaks, because I mean that's the kind of, so far that is the story of the day, isn't it? I just wonder, I mean this is sort of proper ammo, isn't it, for the Tories? Have they come out and said anything yet? I mean, to me, it sort of sums up the absolute chaos we've had for the last few months, really. Yeah,
well, we had a quote in almost straight away from Andrew Griffith on the Tory front bench. He says that he thought that Rachel Reeves may have deliberately leaked the OBR report before standing up so that she could control any market forces that would react during a statement. No evidence that that is the case, but the Tories are certainly using this as evidence that Labour doesn't know what it's doing and that this whole budget process has been a bit of a shambles. But I mean, we should just go through again some of those top lines. The first one, £8.3 billion extra for the Chancellor from freezing income tax thresholds, a £26 billion increase in taxes overall by the end of this forecast period, and some specific ones as well. I know a lot of people have been concerned about this mansion tax, which has been reported. Can you just walk us through what is a mansion tax in this context?
So this is an idea, I think originally was a Lib Dem idea back in the coalition days. It then got co-opted by Ed Miliband when he was leader. And it kind of keeps growing then. It's obviously very popular on the left. And it's also this idea that maybe rich people can leave the country, but their houses are going to still be there. And there's been lots of permutations. It now looks like we know that it's going to hit homes worth £2 million or more. The revenue raised looks pretty tiny. I think from what we've seen, it's £400 million, which might sound a lot, but that's nothing really in terms of government income. Exactly. And you know what's going to happen now is, how much is your home worth? I mean, you only really know when you sell it. So you can imagine whatever the process is for valuing a property, there's going to be appeals lodged instantly. I mean, how do they know? What if you've added an extra bathroom and it's tipped over 2 million? You can see this getting very, very messy. I think our concern as well would be, like a lot of other taxes, they sometimes come in and affect a very small number of people, but then over time, they catch more people, they change the threshold. Now it's houses that are worth £1 million, now it's worth, So you can see how it could be the thin end of the wedge quite easy. And sort of totemically, I think it's a big moment. Even if you don't own a house worth £2 million, you might hope that you would at some point. And I think it's that aspiration message.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, we do consider ourselves to be a country of, we are a property-owning democracy. How being a homeowner is something that people aspire to. And what we actually have, if you read what the economists say about the way that this country is taxed, we are quite heavily taxed in terms of income, but we're not taxed very heavily at all in terms of assets. And this is a real move by Labour, I think, towards trying to tax those assets a bit harder. And I mean, according to what's in the OBR released this morning, we're finding that people with a £5 million house are going to get £7,500 in extra tax a year. But we should now perhaps listen to Rachel Reeves explain it herself. Now we've heard it from the OBR. Let's go to the chamber and see what the MPs there are saying.
It is utterly outrageous that this has happened, and this leak may indeed constitute a criminal act. In Prime Minister's questions, the Leader of the Opposition asked the Prime Minister about this leak, but he refused to answer her question. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, please can you advise this House what steps are at its disposal to force a leak inquiry into this matter? And would it be possible to ask the Table Office to distribute copies of the report given to the House, given that everybody outside of this House has already had the opportunity to read it?
Order! This is not a point of order for the Chair. The Chancellor is about to make her budget statement, and I expect members and their constituents wish to hear from the Chancellor directly. However, before I call the Chancellor to speak, I nonetheless wish to make a short statement. For a number of weeks, and yet again yesterday, there have been extensive briefings to the media on the government's fiscal policy and public finances. This disappointing trend in relation to budget briefings has been growing for a number of years under successive governments, but appears to have reached an unprecedented high. Weeks ago, we saw the Chancellor delivering a speech in Downing Street, setting the scene for the budget, as well as specific policy announcements being briefed out to the media in advance of today's financial statements. I don't need any help. And just a moment ago, it seems the OBR analysis has also appeared online. This all falls short of standards that the House expects. The premature disclosure of the contents of the budget has always been regarded as a supreme discourtesy to this House and to all the democratically elected members, not to mention to Mr. Speaker and to myself, the Chairman of Ways and Means. The government's own ministerial code cannot be clearer, as set out in paragraph 9.1. When Parliament is in session, the most important announcements of government policy should be made in the first instance to Parliament. Mr. Speaker has always upheld the rights of this House and its members to be treated with respect and to be the first to hear major government policy announcements on behalf of their constituents. As Chairman of Ways and Means, I have responsibility to oversee the House's consideration of the budget statement and the ensuing resolutions, which are described in Erskine May paragraph 36-33 as the most important business of Ways and Means in this House. I want honourable members on all sides of the House to have adequate opportunity to hold the Chancellor to account, rather than hear and read about new policies on a daily basis in the media. And like many, I also expected better. Before I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer, I remind honourable members that copies of the budget resolutions will be available to them from the vote office in members' lobby at the end of the Chancellor's statement and online. I also remind honourable members that interventions are not taken during the Chancellor's statement, nor during replies to the Leader of the Opposition or the Leader of the Liberal Democrats. I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Chancellor.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it is my understanding that the Office of Budget Responsibility's Economic and Financial Outlook was released on their website before this statement. This is deeply disappointing and a serious error on their part. The Office for Budget Responsibility have already made a statement taking full responsibility for their breach. Madam Deputy Speaker, we are rebuilding our economy. Over the last 16 months, we have overhauled our planning system to get Britain building, forged new trade deals with the United States, India and the European Union, reformed our visa system to bring the brightest and the best to Britain. We changed our fiscal rules that we inherited from the Conservatives and raised public investment to its highest level in 4 decades. And in last year's budget, I raised taxes on business and the wealthiest to close the £22 billion black hole in the public finances left by the party opposites. And we used that money to fund the biggest ever settlement for our National Health Service. They were the fair and necessary choices. And we faced opposition to them, from opponents to planning reform, who will always demand that the future is built somewhere else, not in their backyard. Opponents to trade, who want to take us down the path of isolation and division. Opponents to investment, who believe that the only good thing a government can do is get out of the way. Opponents who insist that the only way to balance the books is to cut public spending. And opponents who say that we don't need to balance the books at all. But we made these choices for a reason, Because after 14 years of Conservative government, working people demanded and deserved change. Investments, not cuts to our public services. Stability for our public finances, the single most important factor in getting the cost of living down. And economic growth, the best means to improve wages, create jobs and support public services. That is what our plan, that is what this government and our Prime Minister are all about. Today's budget builds on the choices that we have made since July last year. To cut NHS waiting lists, to cut the cost of living, and to cut debt and borrowing. No doubt we will face opposition again, but I have yet to see a credible or a fairer alternative plan for working people. These are my choices, the right choices for a fairer, a stronger and more secure Britain.
Order. Far too much noise, and I expected so much better from you, Dr. Luke Evans. You're meant to be a leader in your community. Simmer down, Chancellor.
I'm happy for them to shout as much as they like, Madam Deputy Speaker, as long as they do it from the opposition benches where they can't cause any more damage. I said there would be no return to austerity, and I meant it. This budget will maintain investment in our economy and in our National Health Service. I said I would cut the cost of living, and I meant it. This budget will bring down inflation and provide immediate relief for families. I said I would cut debt and borrowing, and I meant it. Because of this budget, borrowing will fall as a share of GDP in every year of this forecast. Our net financial debt will be lower at the end of the forecast than it is today, and I will more than double the headroom against our stability rule to £21.7 billion, meeting our stability rule and meeting it a year early. These are my choices, not austerity, not borrowing, not turning a blind eye to unfairness. My choices are a budget for fair taxes, strong public services and a stable economy. That is the Labour choice. Growth is the engine that carries every one of our ambitions forward, through stability, investment and reform. The platform from which British ambition can finally get moving again. Because growth doesn't just appear out of thin air. It is built patiently and stubbornly by people who take risks, by founders who bet their savings on an idea, by firms breaking into new markets, developing new technologies and creating new jobs and new opportunities, by the men and the women who work hard every day in all parts of our country. Our job is not to watch from the sidelines, but to partner with them, backing them every step of the way, to match private enterprise with public ambition. I would like to thank my team of officials at the Treasury for their hard work in preparing this budget. In the spring, the Office of Budget Responsibility forecast that our economy would grow by 1% this year. I said then that Britain would defy the forecasts, and defy them we have. The OBR have upgraded Britain's growth for this year from 1% to 1.5%, reaching the same conclusions as the IMF, the OECD and the Bank of England, who have already upgraded their forecasts. Today, the OBR have published the result of their review of the supply side of the economy. They are clear that this is not about the last 14 months. It is about the previous 14 years. The legacy of Brexit and the pandemic, and the damaging decisions by the party opposite. cutting public spending, leaving communities and entire regions behind, starving our economy of investment and weakening our public services. As a result of their review, the OBR are reducing their expectations for productivity growth by 0.3 percentage points to 1% by the end of the forecast. They say today, and I quote, "Real GDP is forecast to grow by 1.5% on average over the forecast due to lower underlying productivity growth. There is an impact on our public finances too. The OBR say that their productivity forecast will mean £16 billion less in tax receipts by 2030. These forecasts are the Tories' legacy, not Britain's destiny.
Order. It is very hard to hear the Chancellor over all the shouting. And Mr. Holmes, you promised me yesterday you were going to be on top behaviour in the first few minutes. Chancellor.
We beat the forecasts this year and we will beat them again. By boosting trade, not blocking it. By increasing investment, not cutting it. By championing innovation, not stifling it. By backing working people, not making them poorer. Brick by brick, we've been building our economy. Building roads, building homes, getting spades in the ground and cranes in the sky. Growth begins with a spark of an entrepreneur. Half of new jobs in Britain are created by scale-up businesses. And we want those jobs created here, not somewhere else. Our job is to make Britain the best place in the world to start up, to scale up and to stay. So we're widening eligibility for our enterprise incentives, so scale-ups can attract the talent and the capital that they need. Expanding the enterprise management incentive so more companies can offer tax-relieved share options. Re-engineering our enterprise investment and venture capital trust schemes so they don't just back early-stage ideas, but stay with companies as they grow. Introducing UK listings relief, a 3-year exemption from stamp duty reserve tax for companies who choose to list here in Britain. And to continue this work, I am launching a call for evidence on how our tax system can better back entrepreneurs and a targeted review with founders and investors at the heart to make the UK an even more attractive place to grow your business. We are sending a simple message to the world. If you build here, Britain will back you. And our retail investment system should do the same. The UK has some of the lowest levels of retail investment in the G7. And that is not only bad for business, who need that investment to grow, it's bad for savers too. Someone who has invested £1,000 a year in an average stocks and shares ISA every year since 1999 would be £50,000 better off today if they'd put that same money into if they'd put the same money into a cash ISA. And so from April 2027, I will reform our ISA system, keeping the full £20,000 allowance while designating 8,000 of it exclusively for investment, with over 65s retaining the full cash allowance. And thanks to our changes to financial advice and guidance, banks will be able to guide savers to better choices for their hard-earned money. Over 50% of the ISA market, including Hargreaves Lansdown, HSBC, Lloyds, Vanguard and Barclays, have signed up to launch new online hubs to help people invest here in Britain. At this budget, consistent with the commitments in our corporate tax roadmap, I will retain our competitive corporation tax rate, the lowest in the G7, and retain our generous full expensing offer for business investments. I will also introduce a new 40% first-year allowance so that businesses can write off more of the cost of their investment up front, while reducing main rate writing down allowances in line with fiscal constraints. Private investment is the lifeblood of economic growth, but growth needs public investment too. When faced with challenges, previous chancellors have chosen to decrease, delay, or cancel capital spending. But low investment is the cause of our productivity problem, not the solution. So my choice is not cuts, not stagnation, but to maintain the additional £120 billion of investment that I provided at the spending review. In transport, to link our towns and our cities, energy infrastructure to power our businesses, and housing, so people can live near good jobs, paying decent wages and growing businesses. That is the Labour choice. I'm grateful to the Financial Secretary to the Treasury for his work in driving our growth agenda forward. As we allocate investment for the infrastructure that is the backbone of economic growth across our country, today I will commit investment for the Lower Thames Crossing. And we're continuing to drive investment in city-region transport, in the Midlands Rail Hub and the Transpennine Route upgrade, along with our commitments to the Northern Growth Corridor, including Northern Powerhouse Rail. It is this Labour government that has overhauled our planning system, and I will today provide further funding to increase planning capacity through a new skills offer, as called for by the British Chamber of Commerce and the Confederation of British Industry. It is this Labour government that has invested in nuclear power, in Sizewell C and in Culham. We are taking forward our commitment to slash electricity prices for thousands of manufacturing businesses, as Make UK and many others have called for. And today I'm pleased to welcome John Finkelton's report, an ambitious plan to cut the red tape that has tied our nuclear industry in knots for decades. And within 3 months we will set out our plan for delivering his recommendations. We are proud of our industrial heritage, and we are determined to build the industry of the future so that we buy, make and sell more here in Britain. That's why, as we increase defence spending, we are investing in Portsmouth, in Barrow and in Plymouth. And I'm pleased to be supporting Team Derby, an initiative to drive growth in one of our defence industry hubs. It's why we stepped in to save British Steel in Scunthorpe and invested in Sheffield Forgemasters. And it's why we've changed government procurement so we can buy British when it is crucial to our national security. For steel, for shipbuilding, and today for AI, driving innovation and building that great industry here in Britain. But it's not just what we invest that matters, it's how we invest. Putting money and power back in the hands of local and regional leaders. Today, we are devolving £13 billion of flexible funding for 7 mayors to invest in skills, business support and infrastructure. I'm extending the business rates retention pilots in the West of England, Liverpool City region and Cornwall until 2029. I'm providing £30 million for the Kernow Industrial Growth Fund for sectors like critical minerals and marine innovation. I am establishing the Leeds City Fund, a long-term agreement to retain business rates to fund local regeneration projects like the development of Leeds South Bank, and I am allocating £20 million for the new Peterborough Sports Quarter and £16 million for a science centre in Darlington from the Growth Mission Fund. The benefits of investment the benefits of investment and growth must be built and felt in every part of our United Kingdom. So we are providing an additional £370 million for the Northern Ireland Executive, £505 million for the Welsh Government, and £820 million for the Scottish Government over the spending review period through the Barnett formula. And I am making... Sorry, I didn't quite catch that from the SNP. Did they not get that? £120 million for the Scottish Government over the spending review period because Anna Sawa asked us to. And I'm making targeted investments in our industrial strategy sectors across the UK. In Northern Ireland, I am providing £17 million to support businesses and strengthen the UK internal market, and backing advanced manufacturing through the Northern Ireland Enhanced Investment Zone. Wales will be the host for 2 AI growth zones, creating more than 8,000 jobs, supported by a £10 million investment in the semiconductors critical for that industry. And we are building the UK's first small modular nuclear reactors with Rolls-Royce at Wilfer in Anglesey. 2 Labour governments working together in Wales to deliver for the people of Wales. And in Scotland, I'm committing over £14 million for low-carbon technologies in Grangemouth, £20 million to renew infrastructure at Inch Green in Inverclyde, and £20 million to redevelop Kirkcaldy Town Centre and Seafront, with construction starting next year. And that's on top of the UK's biggest ever warship export deal with the Norwegian government to build frigates in Glasgow, supporting 4,000 jobs. Investment opposed by the SNP, jobs opposed by the SNP, defence opposed by the SNP, but secured by this Labour government. A growing economy needs strong foundations of economic stability, with borrowing, inflation down and investment up. That is good for business, and it is good for working people, so they have more money in their pockets. Economic stability, safeguarded by ironclad fiscal rules, is our best defence against rising prices and the best way to improve living standards. We've all seen the alternative. 3 years ago, in their clamour to cut taxes for the richest, the Tories under Liz Truss crashed the economy and sent mortgage rates spiralling and brought pensions to the brink. So loud, Madam Deputy Speaker, and yet I can't even hear them now. Now, I know that the leader of the Green Party is a keen hypnotherapist, and he believes that he can achieve remarkable things using only the power of his mind. Unfortunately, the only things getting bigger under his approach would be the deficit and the rate of inflation. And for all the damage that the Conservative cuts did to our schools and our hospitals, they also doubled the national debt. Our net financial debt this year will be £2.6 trillion, 83% of GDP, meaning that today, 1 in every £10 that government spends is on debt interest. Not on paying down that debt, but just on paying the interest on the debt that we inherited from the Conservatives. My fiscal rules will get borrowing down while supporting investment. The stability rule, that day-to-day expenditure must be met through tax receipts. And the investment rule, which allows me to increase investment whilst getting debt on a downward path. Those fiscal rules are non-negotiable. I met them at the budget last year, I met them in the spring, and I have met them today. While the current budget balance is in deficit by £28.8 billion in 26-27 and £4.6 billion in 27-28, it moves into a surplus of £3.9 billion in 28-29, £21.7 billion in 29-30, and £24.6 billion in 2030-31, more than doubling our headroom against the stability rule and meeting that rule a year early too. And our net financial debt is 83.3% in 26-27, 83.6% in 27-28, 83.7% in 28-29, falling to 83.0% in 29-30 and 82.2% in 2030-31. Madam Deputy Speaker, I said we would cut the debt, and we are, with debt down by the end of the forecast. And going forwards, to support our commitment to a single fiscal event and further strengthen our economic stability, I will follow the recommendations of the International Monetary Fund by assessing the fiscal rules just once a year at the budget. Despite the challenges we face on productivity, the path of our deficit reduction remains broadly the same as in spring. Public sector net borrowing is due to be £112.1 billion, or 3.5% of GDP in 26-27, 3% in 27-28, 2.6% in 28-29, 1.9% in 29-30, and 1.9% in 2030-31, ending at £67.2 billion, translating into an increase in the net cash requirement next year of £4.2 billion, taking the total to £133.3 billion. According to the IMF, we are due to reduce borrowing more over the rest of this Parliament than any other G7 economy. The Conservatives crashed the economy, we are protecting it. The Conservatives lost control of debt, we are getting debt down. The Conservatives let inflation and interest rates go through the roof. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, since Labour took office, the Bank of England have cut interest rates 5 times. I've made my choices. Not reckless borrowing, not dangerous cuts, but stability for our economy, security for our public finances, and security for family finances too. Those are the Labour choices. Madam Deputy Speaker, Tory austerity left classrooms crumbling and waiting lists sky high, weakened our productivity and choked our economic growth. And now they propose a further £47 billion of cuts to our public services. Well, that is equivalent to cutting every police officer in our country twice over. And then there is Reform, who promise more than £100 billion of cuts, with no details of where those cuts will come from or who will pay for them. A recipe for devastating damage to our public services. People voted for Labour because they wanted roads that aren't full of potholes. They want police on our streets, and they want an NHS that is there when they need it. And we're delivering that. Waiting lists down by 230,000. And not just the 2 million additional appointments we promised, but an additional 5.2 million appointments already delivered since the general election. I joined the Labour Party almost 30 years ago because I could see that the Conservative government that I grew up under didn't care much about schools like mine. Textbooks were rationed. I know that many of you weren't at schools like mine.
There is far too much noise, far too much excitement. People need to calm down a little. Chancellor.
They don't want to hear what the Tories did to schools like mine, but I will tell them. Textbooks rationed, libraries closed, kids herded into porter cabins in the playground, and I came into politics to change that. The money that I allocated at the spending review will fix the crumbling classrooms that the Conservatives left behind and build the schools that they promised but never delivered. And today, thanks to representations from my honourable friends, the members for Wolverhampton North East and Leeds South West and Morley, I will provide £5 million for libraries in secondary schools, building on the £10 million commitment to ensure that every primary school has a school library within this Parliament. And thanks to representations from my honourable friends, the members for Bournemouth East and from Luton North, I am providing £18 million to improve and upgrade playgrounds across England. Madam Deputy Speaker, let there be no doubt that this is a government that is on the side of our kids and who will back their potential. I will not allow the legacies of Conservative neglect to stain our society. Last year, I made changes to the Mine Workers Pension Scheme to ensure that its members receive the fair pensions that they are owed. This year, with thanks to the Minister for Pensions for all his work in this subject, I can go further. I have heard representations from Labour Coalfield MPs, including my honourable friends, the members for Bassetlaw, Blyth and Ashington, Barnsley South, Mansfield and Llanelli. And today I can announce that I will transfer the Investment Reserve Fund of the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme to its members. So that the men and the women who worked in our coal industry get a fair deal in their retirement too. And more. Having heard representations from my honourable friends, the members for Banbury and the member for Edinburgh South West, I will index for inflation on pensions accrued before 1997 in the Pension Protection Fund and the Financial Assurance Scheme, so that people whose pension schemes became insolvent, no fault of their own, no longer lose out as the result of inflation. Last year, I also provided funding to compensate the victims of the infected blood scandal, after the previous government failed to budget for the costs of compensation. This year, I have listened to representations from my honourable friend, the member for Eltham and Chislehurst, and my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh South West. And I'd like to thank the Minister for Employment for her representations over many years on this subject. As a result, I will exempt all payments from the infected blood scheme from inheritance tax, regardless of the circumstances in which those payments are passed down. Madam Deputy Speaker, that is how we should be spending taxpayers' money, on dealing with injustices and building strong public services, not on waste and inefficiency. At the spending review, I set an ambitious target of £14 billion of efficiencies per year by 2029, and I am grateful to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury for driving that work forward, realising savings through AI and automation, and by scrapping NHS England and reducing back-office staff by 18,000. At this budget, I will find a further £4.9 billion of efficiencies by 2031, getting rid of police and crime commissioners, cutting the cost of politics and local government, and selling government assets that we no longer have any use for. These savings will be required across government, but for our National Health Service, I will reinvest all of these savings back into the care that people rely on. More nurses, more GPs, more appointments. Restoring the services that faltered under years of Conservative decline and investing in the future of our National Health Service. And today I am announcing £300 million of investment in technology to improve patient service and 250 new neighbourhood health centres. Expanding more services into communities so that people can receive treatment outside of hospitals and get better, faster care where they live. Over 100 of these will be delivered by 2030, including in Birmingham, Truro and Southall. The Labour Party founded our National Health Service, and we will renew our National Health Service. I will take the same approach for defence spending that I take to NHS spending, reinvesting savings back into our national security. In our age of insecurity, Britain will continue to stand with our allies, working in collaboration to secure a sustainable ceasefire for Ukraine, and maintaining our commitment to NATO, with the UK set to spend 2.6% of GDP on defence by April 2027. Madam Deputy Speaker, the public rightly expects that we stamp out fraud, error and waste, and put that money to good use in our schools and our hospitals and other frontline services. My right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, has already announced that she will claw back excess profits from the use of hotels to house asylum seekers, as we phase out the use of those hotels entirely. And we will consult on reforms to indefinite leave to remain and access to taxpayer-funded benefits. The introduction of digital ID will break the link between illegal migration and illegal working. And the HMRC and the Fair Work Agency will crack down on illicit businesses that blight our high streets and undercut illegitimate firms, enforcing the minimum wage, investigating dodgy businesses, and increasing scrutiny of the gig economy, as well as tracking down fraudulent business owners who vanish without paying their taxes. And I'd like to thank my honourable friends, the members for Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes, Lee and Atherton, and Kensington and Bayswater for their representations on this subject. And I'll take further steps to prevent and track down unpaid tax, which will together, these reforms will raise nearly £10 billion a year by 2030, including through new powers for HMRC to pursue the promoters of tax avoidance schemes. I am building on our successful use of targeted checks on welfare claims to root out fraud and error and prevent public money being paid to people who are not entitled to it. And I would like to thank Tom Hayhoe, the COVID Corruption Commissioner, for his work in helping to chase down nearly £400 million from dodgy pandemic spending and contracts. Tory contracts handed out by Tory ministers to Tory peers and Tory friends. Well, that money belongs in our schools and in our hospitals.
Order. It is so noisy now, we can barely hear the Chancellor. Everybody needs to calm down. Chancellor.
Well, I wouldn't want any honourable member to miss this. So we are chasing down that money, and we've got almost £400 million back from dodgy pandemic spending and contracts. Tory contracts handed out by Tory ministers to Tory peers and Tory donors. Well, that money belongs in our schools and in our hospitals, and we are getting that money back. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are ramping up sanctions on Russia, and we are freezing known Russian assets. But let me be clear, I don't actually mean the honourable member for Clacton. Under the Conservatives.
Order. You don't need commentary from the backbenches, and Mr. Dewhurst, you are so loud. It's remarkable how far your voice carries. Chancellor.
Under the Conservatives, the cost of our welfare system increased by nearly 1 percentage point of GDP, equivalent to £88 billion in just 5 years. The broken welfare system that we inherited wrote off millions of people as too sick to work, and we will reform that system so that it is a system that does not count the cost of failure, but one that protects people who cannot work and empowers those who can. We have brought back face-to-face assessments for disability benefits. Those are the face-to-face assessments that the Shadow Chancellor got rid of when he was Work and Pension Secretary. And our changes to universal credit will get 15,000 people back into work, a figure confirmed today. The former Health Secretary, Alan Milburn, will review the causes of rising youth inactivity, and we are already taking action. I'm grateful to the Federation of Small Businesses and Small Business Britain for their representations on apprenticeships. And today I am announcing funding to make the training for under 25 apprenticeships completely free for small and medium-sized enterprises. And funding our new youth guarantee, providing £820 million over the next 3 years to give young people who are let down by the Conservatives the support and the opportunity that they deserve. Guaranteeing every young person a place in college, an apprenticeship or personalised job support. And after 18 months, 18 to 21-year-olds will be offered paid work, not benefits. The Motability Scheme was set up to protect the most vulnerable, not to subsidise the lease on a Mercedes-Benz. And so I am making reforms that will reduce generous taxpayer subsidies, and Motability have confirmed that they will remove luxury vehicles from their scheme, getting the scheme back to its original purpose of offering cost-effective leases to disabled people. And taxpayers' money should not be spent on pensions for people abroad who only lived here for a couple of years and may never even have paid a penny in tax. The Conservatives allowed thousands of people living abroad to buy their way into the state pension for as little as £3.50 a week, debasing the purpose of our pension system. And so I will abolish access to Class 2 voluntary national insurance contributions for people living abroad, increasing the time that someone has to live or work in Britain to 10 years and increasing the contributions that they must pay. These reforms improve our welfare system, they support our young people, protect those who need it most, and put an end to Conservative waste and unfairness. Madam Deputy Speaker, to break the cycle of austerity, we need a fair and a sustainable tax system, one that generates revenues to fund the public services that we all use, and supports investment to grow our economy. That does mean that today I am asking everyone to make a contribution. The previous Conservative government froze personal tax thresholds from 2021 to 2028. And today I will maintain all income tax and equivalent national insurance thresholds at their current level for a further 3 years from 2028. While ensuring that
Order! The noise is far too high. Chancellor.
The Right Honourable Lady supported these freezes when her party made them. She might want to forget about it, but the British people never will. At the same time, we are ensuring that people only in receipt of the basic or new state pension do not have to pay small amounts of tax through simple assessment from April 2027. I will also keep the Plan 2 student loan repayments threshold at its 2026-27 level for 3 years. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know that maintaining these thresholds is a decision that will affect working people. I said that last year, and I won't pretend otherwise now. Madam Deputy Speaker, I am asking everyone to make a contribution, but I can keep that contribution as low as possible because I will make further reforms to our tax system today to make it fairer and to ensure that the wealthiest contribute the most. The Conservatives knew that our tax system didn't work. Time and time again, they ducked the necessary reforms, leaving a system unfit for a changing economy, with unfairness that they refused to address. Currently, a landlord with an income of £25,000 will pay nearly £1,200 less in tax than their tenants with the same salary, because no national insurance is charged on property, dividend or savings income. It's not fair that the tax system treats different types of income so differently. And so I will increase the basic and higher rate of tax on property, savings and dividend income by 2 percentage points, and the additional rate of tax on property and savings income by 2 percentage points. Even after these reforms, 90% of taxpayers will still pay no tax at all on their savings. As well as narrowing the gap between the tax on income from assets and income from work, I also believe that a fair society is one where the wealthiest pay their fair share. The reforms I made last year will raise an additional £8 billion a year by 2020-30 from wealth. I increased taxes last year on private equity, private schools and private jets. I abolished the non-dom tax regime. And this year, I will make 2 changes to cap trust charges and prevent avoidance. I reformed inheritance tax on agricultural and business assets. And this year, I am aligning those reforms with wider inheritance tax rules by allowing the transfer of the 100% relief allowance between spouses, balancing the taxation of these valuable assets with the realities of family life. In this budget, I will take further steps to deal with a long-standing source of wealth inequality in our country. A Band D home in Darlington or Blackpool pays just under £2,400 in council tax, nearly £300 more than a £10 million mansion in Mayfair. And so, from 2028, I am introducing the high-value council tax surcharge in England, an annual £2,500 charge for properties worth more than £2 million, rising to £7,500 for properties worth more than £5 million. This will be collected alongside council tax, levied on owners, and we will consult on options for support or deferral. This new surcharge will raise over £400 million by 2031 and will be charged on less than the top 1% of properties. Madam Deputy Speaker, reliefs in our tax system cost the taxpayer billions of pounds a year, but many of them no longer serve their original purpose. The government rightly provides generous tax relief for people paying into a pension, relieving income tax on all contributions and on the investment itself, as well as national insurance relief on employer contributions, at a cost of over £70 billion a year to the Exchequer. This budget makes no changes to those reliefs or to the tax-free lump sum. But salary sacrifice for pensions, which was intended to be a small part of our pension system, is forecast to almost treble in cost to other taxpayers, from £2.8 billion in 2017 to £8 billion by 2030, with the greatest benefit going to the highest earners, or to those in the financial services sector putting their bonuses into pensions tax-free, while those on the minimum wage or those whose employers don't offer salary sacrifice don't benefit at all. That is not sustainable for our public finances, putting pressure on the tax that everyone else pays. And so I am introducing a £2,000 cap on salary sacrifice into a pension, with contributions above that taxed in the same way as other employee pension contributions. That is a pragmatic step so that people, especially on low and middle incomes, can continue to use salary sacrifice for their pension without paying any more in tax than they do now, and to give individuals and employers time to adjust to these new arrangements. These changes will come into effect in 2029. The coalition government introduced 100% relief from capital gains tax on business sales made to employee ownership trusts, creating a route for gains to go completely untaxed when businesses are sold. I will reduce that relief to 50%, retaining a strong incentive for employee-owned companies. And as we work towards doubling the size of the cooperative economy, the Department for Business and Trade will launch a call for evidence on how we can better support co-ops to grow. Because of the changes that I have made to capital gains tax this year and last year, receipts are forecast to increase from £14 billion this year to £30 billion by 2030. To support our high streets, I am announcing a package of regulatory changes as called for by UK Hospitality and the British Retail Consortium. And I will support the Great British Pub through our new national licensing framework, encouraging councils to back our pubs and to back late-night venues with greater freedoms. For business rates, I will introduce permanently lower tax rates for over 750,000 retail, hospitality and leisure properties, the lowest rates since 1991, paid for through higher rates on properties worth more than £500,000, like the warehouses used by online giants. Alongside this, I will introduce a package of support worth over £4.3 billion over the next 3 years for a property of any size seeing a large increase in their bill. And to support a level playing field in retail, I will stop online firms from undercutting our high street businesses by ensuring customs duty applies on parcels of any value. I will reform our motoring taxes. exempting search and rescue vehicles from vehicle excise duty as called for by my honourable friends, the member for the Western Isles and for Whitehaven and Workington. And because all cars contribute to the wear and tear on our roads, I will ensure that drivers are taxed according to how much they drive and not just by the type of car they own, by introducing the electric vehicle excise duty on electric cars. This will be payable each year alongside vehicle excise duty at 3p per mile for electric cars and 1.5p for plug-in hybrids, helping us to double road maintenance funding in England over the course of this Parliament. And alongside this, I am providing support to boost our British car industry, increasing the threshold for the expensive car supplement on electric vehicles to £50,000, saving over 1 million motorists £440 a year. Providing £1.3 billion additional funding for the electric car grant, extending it to 2030 and taking total funding to £2 billion, as well as delaying changes to the employee car ownership scheme. In addition, we're investing a further £200 million to accelerate the rollout of EV charging, as well as 100% business rates relief for EV charge points for the next decade, with thanks to my honourable friend, the member for Camborne and Redruth, for his representations on this policy. And I will improve competition in our taxi industry by ending ride-hailing companies' use of a discount scheme intended for coach tours, as called for by Steve McNamara, the General Secretary of the Licensed Taxi Drivers Association, legislating to restrict access so that everyone pays fairly and protecting £700 million of tax revenue each year. I am responding to our consultation on landfill tax, and listening to representations, particularly from our house building industry. I will not converge towards a single rate, but I will prevent the gap between the two rates from widening to balance the need to address tax avoidance in the current structure. I will today publish Ray McCann's report into the loan charge along with the government's response, setting out a new settlement opportunity that will finally allow people to finalise their position and draw a line under this long-standing issue. And I'd like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Milton Keynes Central, for her representations on this subject. I will continue with the planned uprating for tobacco duties that I set out last year and uprate alcohol duties by inflation, along with our plans to introduce a vaping products duty in 2026 and changes to the soft drinks industry levy announced by my right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, yesterday. And I'd like to thank the Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury for his work on all the tax measures in this budget. I will also reform gambling taxes in response to the rise in online gambling. Remote gaming is associated with the highest levels of harm. And so I am increasing remote gaming duty from 21% to 40%. With duty on online betting increasing from 15% to 25%. I am making no change to the taxes on in-person gambling or on horse racing. And I am abolishing bingo duty entirely from April next year. Taken together, my reforms to gambling tax will raise over £1 billion per year by 2031. As a result of the tax reforms I have made today, I can confirm that I will not be increasing national insurance, the basic, higher or additional rates of income tax or VAT. And I have kept everyone's contribution as low as possible through reforms to make our tax system stronger, closing loopholes, ensuring that the wealthiest pay their share, and building a tax system that is fairer for the future as our economy changes. On the day I became Chancellor, I said that I would judge my time in office a success if I knew that ordinary children from working class backgrounds were living more fulfilling lives. Their horizons expanded, their potential realised. I joined the Labour Party, I came into politics because I believe that every child has equal worth and deserves an equal chance to achieve their promise. The biggest barrier to equal opportunity is child poverty. Because for every child that grows up in poverty, our society pays a triple cost. The first and the heaviest is to the child. Going to school hungry, waking up in a cold home, or in another B&B. While other children enjoy the advantages of parents with time to help with homework, the quiet space at home to work in, too many go without. And there is also the cost of supporting a family in poverty, which ends up in the lap of overstretched councils, who can do no more than shunt them into temporary accommodation at huge cost to local taxpayers. Then there is the future cost, to our economy and to our society, of wasted talent and a welfare system that bears the cost of failure for decades to come. Young people with so much to contribute, but whose potential is suffocated early by limited life chances and missed opportunities, struggling to make their way in a society that did not look out for them. I don't intend to preside over a status quo that punishes children for the circumstances of their birth and demands that we all pay 3 times over for it. Since last July, we've rolled out free breakfast clubs in schools. We're expanding free school meals to 500,000 more kids, lifting 100,000 children out of poverty as we do it. We've passed the Renters' Rights Act and we've extended the childcare offer. And I'm proud of all of that. But it's not enough. Because there is one policy that pushes kids into poverty more than any other. It was introduced by the party opposite. They said it would save money and that it would bring about behavioural change, disincentivising poorer families from having more children. Well, even on its own terms, it failed. The welfare bill has continued to rise, and there's been no difference in the size of families. But what it has done is to push hundreds of thousands of children into poverty since it was introduced. They said they were punishing parents' choices, but it's the kids who have paid the price. They've paid the price for the policies of a party which opted for cynical gimmicks over real savings in our welfare system. I understand that many families are finding times hard and that many kids have had to make difficult choices when it comes to having kids. And there are many reasons why people choose to have children and then find themselves in difficult times. The death of a partner, separation, ill health, a lost job. I don't believe that children should have to bear the brunt of that. And neither can I, in good conscience, leave in place the vile policy known as the rape clause, requiring women to prove if their child has been conceived non-consensually to receive support. I'm proud to be Britain's first female Chancellor of the Exchequer. I take the responsibilities that come with that seriously. I will not tolerate the grotesque indignity of women of the rape clause any longer. It is dehumanising, it is cruel, and I will remove it from the statute book. And so because I am tackling fraud and error in our welfare system, because I am cracking down on tax avoidance, because I am reforming gambling taxation, I can announce today, fully costed and fully funded, the removal of the 2-child limit in full from April. This side of the house. It's amazing what people get so angry about, and we've seen their true colours today. The thing they get angry about is lifting children out of poverty.
Order. Our constituents will want to hear the Chancellor.
I think our constituents have heard all they need to from the party opposites today. We on this side of the House do not believe that the solution to a broken welfare system is to punish the most vulnerable. We are lifting 450,000 children out of poverty with the end of the two-child limit. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, combined with other actions we are taking, this Labour government is achieving the biggest reduction in child poverty over a parliament since records began. That is the difference that this Labour government is making. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know how worried families are about the cost of everything. Worried that their money won't stretch to the end of the month. Worried that price... I think if you've got a house that's worth £5 million a year, you can probably afford it. But you get more exercise about reducing child poverty than you do about the richest paying more. Under this government, wages have risen by more since we were elected than in 10 years under the last government, with lower interest rates already saving families £1,200 a year off a typical new mortgage, compared to that to when Liz Truss was Prime Minister. But I know that people still face pressure on their budgets day to day and week to week. And where there is more to do, where we can provide relief, we are doing it. Extending the bus fare cap, cracking down on rip-off price hikes, freezing prescription charges and freezing rail fares for the first time in 30 years. I am increasing the basic and new state pension by 4.8%, an increase of £440 per year for the basic state pension, and an increase of £575 per year for the new state pension, in line with our commitment to the triple lock. At the election, we promised a genuine living wage, and we are delivering it. At the budget last year, I increased the national minimum wage and the national living wage, and I am doing the same this year too. Accepting the recommendations of the Low Pay Commission in full, and increasing the minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds from £10 to £10.85 an hour, and increasing the living wage from £12.21 to £12.71 an hour. Under current plans, the temporary 5p cut to fuel duty that was introduced during the pandemic will come to an end in April, and fuel duty will be uprated in line with inflation. But I know that the cost of travelling to and from work is still too expensive. And so I am extending the 5p cut until September 2026. And because I know that changes in wholesale prices are not always passed on to motorists, I am bringing in new rules to mandate petrol forecourts to share real-time price rises through a new fuel finder, empowering drivers to find the cheapest fuel, calling out rip-offs and strengthening competition, saving the average household £40 a year. Madam Deputy Speaker, one of the greatest drivers of the rising cost of living is the cost of energy prices. The cause of high energy bills must be tackled at source, and so we are investing in energy security, in nuclear and renewable energy, and in insulation through our Warm Homes Plan. But that's not enough when people are struggling with energy bills today. The Conservatives' Eco Scheme was presented as a plan to tackle fuel poverty. It costs households £1.7 billion a year on their bills. And for 97% of families in fuel poverty, the scheme, get this, has cost them more than it's saved. It is a failed scheme, and so I am scrapping it, along with taking other legacy costs off bills. And as a result, I can tell you today that for every family, we are keeping our promise to get energy bills down and cut the cost of living. With £150 cut from the average household bill from April next year. Money off bills and in the pockets of working people. That is my choice. not to neglect Britain's energy security like the Tories did, not to leave working families to bear the brunt of high prices like the Tories did, but to get energy costs down now and in the future. That is the Labour choice. And Madam Deputy Speaker, one more thing. Because of our action on bills and on prices, as a direct result of this budget, the Office for Budget Responsibility confirmed today that inflation is coming down faster and will be a full 0.4 percentage points lower next year. That's the benefit of a Labour government cutting the cost of living. Madam Deputy Speaker, this Labour government is changing our country. In the face of challenges on our productivity, I will grow our economy through stability, investment and reform. I've met my fiscal rules and built our economic resilience for the future. I have asked everyone to contribute, yes, for the security of our country and the brightness of its future. But I have kept that contribution as low as possible by reforming our tax system, making it fairer and stronger for the future. I have protected our NHS, maintaining public investment and driving efficiency in government spending. I've taken action on our broken welfare system, rooting out waste and lifting children out of poverty. And I have cut the cost of living, with money off bills and prices frozen, all while keeping every single one of our manifesto commitments. Those are my choices.
Order. Mr. Rankin, Miss Moulton, your voice carries right across the chamber. Right across the chamber. Try and take a breath every so often. Chancellor.
Those are my choices. Not austerity, not reckless borrowing, but cutting the debt, cutting waiting lists, and cutting the cost of living. Those are Labour choices, promised and delivered by this budget, promised and delivered by this Labour government. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Well, there we have it. Rachel Reeves' budget. We knew quite a lot of that already. The leaked OBR report revealed much of that before the Chancellor stood up, but there's still plenty to get into and quite a few standout announcements there.
Yes, as you say, we ended up knowing it all, but I think this has turned out to be a much bigger budget than maybe we were thinking a couple of days ago. £30 billion of tax rises. I'm going to go through some of them quickly now. Huge income tax rises. The bulk of that is from these frozen thresholds we spoke about before. They're also capping, the amount you can salary sacrifice into your pension. That's at £2,000 a year. That affects lots and lots of private sector employers, and people are already saying, if you look on social media or in our inbox, this is very, very damaging potentially to the long-term sustainability of the country, the ability of people to save up their own private pensions. There's also news on new taxes for dividends, so money you get out of a company, so if you're a business owner, property income, so if you're a landlord and if you're a saver. It appears that she's raised by 2 percentage points the tax rate on those. That wasn't briefed at all, and I don't think anyone expected that. That should apparently raise £2 billion a year in extra income. Then we've got the so-called mansion tax, what they're calling the high value council tax surcharge. That's going to hit homes worth more than £2 million. We think about 150,000 homes will pay that, which could be up to £7,000 a year, so that's huge, and it's, again, thinning in the wedge that could always expand in the future. Fuel duty has been frozen again. It's been frozen for years. It's been frozen again. But at the same time, we're having a pay per mile charge on electric vehicles to recoup some of that money. That's a big change. And then ISA reforms, also very interesting. It seems like over 65s is going to get the full £20,000 allowance, but younger people are not going to.
Well, a huge number of changes there. Quite a lot of them going to raise people's taxes. Let's go and watch Kemi Badenoch's response to that. The Leader of the Opposition speaking now in the chamber.
Really should be her last. What a total humiliation. A total humiliation. Last.
Can colleagues who are exiting the chamber do so swiftly? so we can focus on the Leader of the Opposition. Swiftly exit, quietly. Right. Leader of the Opposition.
It's a total humiliation, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last year, she put up taxes by £40 billion, the biggest tax rate in British history. She promised that she wouldn't be back for more. She swore it was a one-off. She told everyone that from now on, it would be stability and she would pay for everything with growth. Today, she has broken every single one of those promises. If she had any decency, she would resign. At the last budget, she said she was proud to be the country's first ever female Chancellor. After this budget, she will go down as the country's worst ever Chancellor.
Order. And the Chief Whip in particular knows that we don't allow clapping in the chamber. Leader of the Opposition.
Today she has announced a new tax rate of £26 billion. They're all cheering. Household income is down. Spending policies in this budget increase borrowing in every year. That smorgasbord of misery we just heard from her can be summed up in one sentence. Labour are hiking taxes to pay for welfare. This is a budget for Benefit Street, Madam Deputy Speaker, paid for by working people. This budget increases benefits for 560,000 families by an average of £5,000. They are hiking taxes on workers, pensioners and savers to pay for handouts to keep their backbenchers quiet. These are the same, yes, they can chanter all they like. These are the same backbenchers, Madam Deputy Speaker, who cheered last year when she taxed jobs and left more than 100,000 people without an income. They cheered because they didn't understand the consequences of what they were doing, and they still don't. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's not been an easy time.
Well, it looks pretty spicy in the chamber there. Tony, do you think they have broken the manifesto, as Kemi Badenoch just said?
Well, I mean, this is going to be a debate that's going to rumble on for a long time, I think. It's obvious that this was going to be the Tories' main attack. Remind ourselves, back last year, Labour in their manifesto said they wouldn't put up taxes on working people, and they defined that as no increase in income tax, VAT or national insurance. Rachel Reeves' last budget last year, she did imply that freezing the thresholds, as she's done today, netting out 8.3 billion, would be a tax on working people. Now, of course, the government claims that it's not, and this is just a continuation of the freeze that's already there. I don't think it's not as clear-cut a manifesto breach that it necessarily would have to be seriously political damaging for Rachel Reeves. But of course, there will be a lot of voters who feel lied to and feel like putting up taxes by tens of billions every single budget, as the Chancellor has done over the last 2 years, is not exactly what they signed up for when they voted for Labour the last election.
Exactly. And Badenoch's line there as well, she straight away went in on, effectively, this is working people paying for Benefit Street, I think she said. I didn't go through those announcements before, but should we just go through the kind of the giveaway side of the budget? Who's getting some money?
Yeah, so I think the two biggest policies that we're looking at here are a big discount on energy bills, which Rachel Reeves says is going to save the average bill payer £150 a year. That comes from reducing the renewables obligation, which is a net zero levy which is charged to everyone's energy bills, and the government is trying to get that down. There's a bit of politics behind this, which is the government's trying to reduce the price of electricity versus the price of gas because it's trying to convince people to shift onto heat pumps and other kinds of more environmentally sustainable fuel. But that's a big win for your average bill payer. And you've also got the elimination of the two-child benefit cap, which has been a major issue rumbling along the Labour backbenches for the last few months, as especially people on the Labour left saying that it's a cruel policy which is pushing children into
that
poverty.
Probably got the biggest cheers, I think, didn't it, from the sort of the Labour benches?
I think so. I think one point I'll just point out here, when you listen to Kemi Badenoch's first line of response, she says this is a budget that taxes hardworking people for the benefit of Benefit Street. That is actually pretty much the same argument that Rachel Reeves herself made when she was talking about it as the Tories were jeering during her announcement on the two-child cap. She said, you would rather these people remain in child poverty than you would see people living in £5 million houses pay extra tax. And so it's clear, I mean, the dividing line here is clear. This is a budget which punishes those higher earners. It punishes people who make their income in different ways. It especially punishes people who have expensive houses. And the winners here are the average bill payer and people who are on welfare payments. I wonder, one of the key questions here is obviously going to be, there's a huge amount of extra tax being raised here. Was it necessary to do that? And do you think that the public is going to really feel the pinch in their next paycheck after all these measures come into effect?
Yeah, and I think so. I mean, obviously they're staggered, so they're not all going to come in instantly, so it will be a bit of a slow burn, I suppose. But really it does kind of hit so many parts of your personal finance. I just wanted to read out a comment someone sent us through, one of the readers. He says, don't own and run a company. Don't try and advance your career. Don't buy additional property. Don't try to save for private school. Don't save your money. Don't be a farmer. Don't work to buy a nice house. Don't invest your money. Thanks, Rachel. And I think that does kind of sum up just how broad this stuff is. Should we go through some of them again? So we talked about income tax broadly with the frozen thresholds. And salary sacrifice is one of these things that we have mentioned it before, but maybe it's not that well understood, I think. I think actually probably lots of people don't realise they're actually in these schemes. It's about a third of private sector employers let you do this, and effectively you give up some of your income for various things, mainly pension contributions, and that effectively lowers your income for income tax purposes. So you get a tax benefit, but in return for putting money away for your retirement, which you'd think the state would want to encourage. And that's why the industry, the pensions industry, and other politicians will say that this is the wrong policy. You know, we're trying to encourage people to save because we do have this savings crisis. That we don't have final salary schemes anymore. You have to save for yourself. And this probably is going to lead to less money going into everyone's pension pots. So maybe we won't notice it for a bit, but in 20, 30, 40 years' time, you'll have people retiring on far lower incomes. It's quite clever because I think people don't quite get that maybe, and it's raising a few billion a year. But we will feel the impact of that.
I think some people might think of that as being a fairly short-sighted fiscal measure because, of course, it does raise revenue. It raises a fair amount of revenue, £4 billion or so in the immediate term. But it will lead to people having lower pension pots in the long run, and that is, you know, with an ageing society and the increasing burden that the elderly have on people of working age, isn't this just kind of creating a time bomb which is going to tick away for the next 30 years or so until people of this cohort are ready to retire themselves? Yeah,
that's exactly right. Let's go back one step to income tax thresholds, because that is probably, I mean, that's the biggest single measure that raises, I think, around 8 billion, wasn't it? Again, people don't probably quite understand this, but effectively, the income tax system is based on bands. Those bands have been frozen, but over time, because of inflation, I mean, Rachel Reeves actually mentioned, she sort of crowed about how much wages have gone up, I think, since Labour took over, which of course is a good thing. But if you don't increase with inflation those bands, you start pushing people over limits where you pay a high rate of tax. So I think the figure is now there'll be an extra 900,000 or so higher rate payers paying 40p in every pound to the government. So again, you don't feel it maybe, it's a bit like salary sacrifice, you probably won't notice it initially, but over time it's billions and billions of pounds that you would have otherwise got. And I think it contributes to that feeling of, even if you're on quite a good salary, you probably don't feel very rich, you don't feel like earning more doesn't necessarily give you a better quality of life. And I think that's the problem all politicians will face, because we have to remember this was a Tory policy initially, the freezing. They've now extended it for another 3 years. That was one thing I thought 100% they're going to do that. There was absolutely no way they'd ever not do what they've done.
Well, I think it's really interesting, this income tax freeze, because a lot of these policies are designed to target very specific people. They are people who drive electric vehicles, people who live in £5 million houses, people who make their money through dividend income, for instance, who have long been in the sights of this Labour Chancellor. Now, we're looking at an income tax threshold freeze which pretty much hits everyone who earns more than £12,570. This is a very, very broad-based tax rise, which he's had to do because it raises £8 billion. I mean, it's the single largest tax rise in this budget, and she wanted to increase her fiscal headroom, give herself a little bit more of a cushion in case of any economic instability over the next 12 months or so. But there's no getting around it. As much as she can say that this is a budget which hits the higher earners in order to help people at the lower end, a threshold freeze will mean that pretty much everyone who goes out to work full time is taking home less money at the end of the month. And you know, that's something perhaps voters won't realise.
Yep.
But compared to a government which unfroze the thresholds, as we were expecting her to do, it does make a pretty significant difference.
Yeah, it's huge. And And I think it has been called a regressive. It's a regressive policy, which means it actually hits people at the lower end more. So people who weren't paying any tax are now paying a bit of tax. Actually, it's a bigger slice of their wages than someone who's earning £200,000 potentially. So, maybe doesn't fit quite what you think a Labour government would do. Should we move on to the mansion tax?
Yeah, let's have a look at it. This is an interesting policy, and what the way that it's been explained in this OBR report, which we very helpfully had published before the Chancellor even stood up, the way that it's been described is that people who are in houses which are worth more than £2 million will be paying extra council tax, and that will be done on a banded basis, similar to most taxes. So someone in a £2 million house will be paying less than someone in a £5 million house. Someone in a £5 million house will be paying an extra £7,500 a year in the council tax. But oddly, I mean, I don't know what you think about this, the money that is raised by doing that is not going to councils, which is the way the council tax is usually administered, obviously. That money is going directly to the Treasury. So it's a kind of simple way of doing a mansion tax, but also one which still relies on the council tax valuations, which have long been an issue for governments before.
It's really messy, I think, isn't it? Lots of Labour backbenchers and think tanks have been calling for a wealth tax. This looks like that's effectively what it is. They've called it a high, they're calling it a council tax surcharge, but as you say, it doesn't go to councils. It's nothing to do with your bins being collected, which is what council tax is supposed to pay for. This is just a way to get more money out of people deemed wealthy. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think all those properties are going to be London and the South East. Almost all of them, I imagine, 90% of them, probably, maybe more than that. A lot of those constituencies actually voted Labour, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I think it goes back to that same point, doesn't it, sort of aspiration. We'd all like to own very expensive properties, I imagine, and this feels like you're sort of being punished for maybe being successful and getting a nice house. And again, where does it lead to? Where does this end? Now they've started it, it's now going to be in the rules. It'd be quite easy for them to say, actually, it's 1.5 million now, or actually, it's £10,000 a year. It's going to be interesting to see what behaviour this drives. Will you people start demolishing conservatories to take value off their property?
Well, this is the thing. As the mansion tax was being discussed, people were already talking about how to devalue their homes and try and get out of it. And the other problem is that this tax is based on 1991 council tax valuations. And so when you have areas which have become more wealthy over the last 30 years, versus areas which have basically remained the same, that the council tax valuations are totally wrong now. I mean, if you look in 1991, Buckinghamshire, for instance, very well-off area, the house prices were high, those houses are all in higher bands. Walthamstow, North London, house prices comparatively fairly low. In the meantime, those two places have flipped. Mm-hmm. Now you find that there's very few higher rate taxpayers living in Walthamstow, but loads living in Buckinghamshire. Buckinghamshire is going to be hit really hard by this. So there is a kind of inherent problem in the tax system here, which has not been managed by this policy. Instead, what we're seeing is more money being piled on top in this surcharge. We should probably move on and look at some of these other things. We mentioned earlier EVs.
Yep.
Let's just talk a little bit about that, EVs and fuel duty and the way that those two things interact. Basically, if you're a electric car driver, which the government wants you to be, is it a good day for you?
No, I suppose it's a day probably you may have been expecting. It has been a good time to be an EV driver because you've been given bunged a load of money to buy one. So you could argue it's kind of helped wealthier people who maybe would have bought a car anyway. They just got a bit of extra help. But the government's realised now we're maybe at a tipping point where they're not taxed enough in terms of compare them to internal combustion engine drivers. That revenue is disappearing slowly. So it feels inevitable. But yes, it may put you off for a bit longer. Because I think that's the thing with electric cars, isn't it? You never know when's the moment, when's the technology right for me to buy. They're still much more expensive. So I think it probably will dent demand for a bit, and then we'll forget about it.
I think it's interesting, the policy on EVs, actually. I mean, I was away over the weekend in South Africa with Keir Starmer at the G20, and while we were there, the government announced that they were going to be giving away more subsidies to people who want to buy EVs, giving them money in their pockets or money off the cars. It seems that this policy basically is juicing demand in one way and then trying to tax the people who've followed the government's incentives to do that at the same time. I guess
that's where they get some money back, I suppose. Maybe they've already factored that in. We'll give you some money here, you switch, we'll claw a bit back.
Claw a bit back later, when you think you're going to save some cash. Let's just talk a little bit about the politics of that, though. I mean, there were a few standout moments for me in that. It felt to me like a very political budget statement.
It was rowdy in there as well, wasn't it?
It was very rowdy. A lot of Nuscani there, the Deputy Speaker, was telling off a a load of MPs, but there were a few people who were actually pulled out specifically by Rachel Reeves for attack. One of them was Mel Stride, Shadow Chancellor. You would expect him to be attacked in this context. He is, of course, her direct shadow. She attacked him on benefits. She said that he was the one who had increased the benefits bill by so much when the Tories were in power, and so he can't complain now. Fairly run-of-the-mill, I would say, for a budget briefing. Two things that I wasn't expecting, though: an attack on Nigel Farage and attack on Zach Polanski. And I think that's kind of a sign of the sort of multipolar politics that we have now, the five-party politics, where if you're in government, you've got to stand at the dispatch box and you're kind of shooting off in 5 different directions at the same time.
And they were pretty scripted, weren't they? I think those attacks.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably some jokester who's been hired by the Treasury to freelance, maybe, to do these jokes in advance. But I mean, what did you think about the attack on Farage, accusing him of being a Russian asset?
Well, as you say, she knows exactly what she's doing. It does feel like quite a dicey one. Don't know if there's any proof of that, but it makes total sense, doesn't it? I mean, I think they're raising taxes, they're unpopular, and I think they need to start pointing at other parties. And reforms policies they were hurriedly kind of redrawn, weren't they? And I think we're still a bit unclear about exactly what their economic policies are.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of pressure on him.
That's right. I think we've seen over the last few weeks, Reform has been doing a big push on the economy in the lead up to the budget in an attempt to kind of allay some of the concerns about their
because they wanted
pledges.
Initially said that they would scrap the 2-child cap on benefits, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, Reform is really kind of trying to straddle here its two types of voters: the kind of red ball voters deserting Labour, and then higher end voters in terms of income deserting the Tories. So yeah, I mean, you also just see the government tends to attack Nigel Farage any opportunity it gets now. They're 30 points in the polls, and they have been for some time. There was also an attack on Zach Polanski, the Green Party.
Maybe the funniest bit.
Yeah, it's just a slightly dirty joke by the Chancellor, I thought. Referring to his former career as a breast enlargement hypnotist. She said the only things that would get bigger under a Green government would be the size of the national debt and inflation.
Yeah, good gag. I think. But it does show that they're a threat, I suppose, to Labour, and probably that came out of some of his policies, I think, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the really interesting thing that I'll be looking out for, and I know Kemi Badenoch's still speaking here, we've been talking over her, but the really interesting thing will be if the Tories can use this and seize on it as a moment of comeback for them. Because the strategy so far from the Conservatives has been pretty much to lie low and try and rebuild that message of fiscal credibility that they had, with David Cameron as Prime Minister, with Theresa May as Prime Minister, which they kind of shot to bits in the Liz Truss mini budget and various other problems that they had over the last couple of years of being in government. Can the Tories now bring that message back? Can they kind of emerge submarine-like from the poll situation that they're in now and try and use that to attack Rachel Reeves? I think that probably, for Kemi Badenoch, is their best route back to get some really serious.
There were lots of Liz Truss. I mean, I don't know, 3 or 4 mentions, I think, of Liz Truss, however many years on we are. And that is a difficult thing, isn't it, for the Tories to get away from, I think. I mean, she's also, of course, claiming credit for mortgage rates coming down, which I don't think it's really anything to do with the government. It's set by the Bank of England. But it's interesting. That's their strongest line, they still think.
Yeah, absolutely. And Liz Truss, of course, maintains that the policies that she was pursuing were the right ones, but they were perhaps badly announced. There's something that Rachel Reeves and Liz Truss do have in common, though, which is that they don't like the OBR very much today.
Yes.
Liz Truss always complained about the OBR and how difficult they made her life. Rachel Reeves in an extraordinary position today, where all of her policies were pre-leaked by the people who were supposed to be forecasting them.
Yeah. Should we look at some of the sort of smaller things? I mean, there was a lot actually in here. One thing that jumped out at me was, and it was an interesting one, and the Telegraph broke this story originally actually, was a couple of £1 billion going to a mine workers' staff pension scheme, which, I mean, if you look at the comments already below the piece, you'll see, again, it's that kind of feeling that there are some groups that are being given money effectively paid for by the rest of us working. On the flip side of that, there was an interesting announcement about people who were moved abroad, so expats, being able to top up their state pensions from abroad, which was an interesting one. It maybe speaks to the idea that people are leaving and we're trying to properly cut them off now, and that maybe is a Labour thing of we don't mind if people leave. Was there anything that jumped out at you, smaller things?
Yeah, well, I was interested by what she said about the infected blood scandal compensation scheme, because that has been a big complaint, especially from Labour MPs over the last few months, which is that money paid to people who were affected by the infected blood scandal, it would still be subject to inheritance tax. And
That's
so
right.
people, especially people who are likely to pass away quite soon, face basically having to give back all of the money that they got from the government in compensation payments. And so that, I think, that is not a particularly expensive announcement, but probably one which will be welcomed.
Seems pretty sensible.
Yeah, it does seem pretty sensible. We should probably also just have a quick word about the fiscal headroom. It's not the sexiest budget topic, but it is an important one. At the last budget, she had £9.9 billion in fiscal headroom. That was historically quite low. And she's increased it now to £21.9 billion, which is basically the extra amount of money that she's got sitting around in the budget. She's chosen to put an extra, more than £10 billion into that pot, and that's designed to kind of stabilise her over the next year or so. I think what we're seeing here, my sort of overall take, if you don't mind, would be kind of some giveaways to Labour voters, things that are going to appease Labour backbenchers, things on the two-child benefit cap, things on energy bills, and at the same time some stuff that's going to appease the markets, stuff on headroom, borrowing falling, and actually you might even say that her policy on ISAs is quite good for the finance industry. Of course, all of that money going to stocks and shares ISAs ultimately is going to end up in the pockets of wealth managers. But it was kind of a budget of appeasement in those two camps and paid for pretty much by the middle classes. I don't know, was there anything else that jumped out with you as...
You mentioned the ISA thing, and then there was an interesting quirk there, wasn't there, about effectively, if you're over 65, you're going to get to keep the full £20,000 allowance. You can put all of that into cash if you like. For younger people, you're going to be effectively, if you want to use £20,000 a year into an ISA, some of it's going to have to go into the stock market. Now, I think they've dressed this up as this is good for you because, of course, you get higher returns from the stock market, and isn't that nice? I think in reality that means they're going to make money out of that in taxes, because if you do want to invest in cash, you don't want to go into the stock market, which of course is more risky, you're going to put that money into a bank account, which will be taxable. Cynically, that's what is going on there. It's an interesting one though, because again, it stokes that intergenerational divide I think we have with a lot of policies. So the triple lock on the state pension, which is this huge issue that people always talk about, that remains in place. Pensions will be getting an extra £500 a year from April. That costs lots and lots and lots, and of course, we can debate whether it's a benefit or not. I know that gets some people angry, but it's interesting they decided to maybe widen that divide between people.
Do you think that ISA policy is more of a kind of nudge policy, which is designed to change behaviour, or more of a kind of secret revenue raiser that the Treasury wants to put in to get some more cash? It sounds like you're falling down on the second one.
I think it's the latter. I'm sure we in personal finance world, we would always encourage people to invest if they have a long time to, but it's not always right. And at the end of the day, it's your money. I'm not sure you should be sort of forced to do something which could be quite risky. Everyone's talking about kind of a frothy stock market at the moment. Is it a good idea to put your money in that? Maybe if you've got lots of time to recover, but if you're talking you need to buy a house in 5 years' time, possibly not. So yes, I think it is. I think all these things are about squeezing a bit more income, because it's 15, 20 tiny little raises, and we're going to spend a long, long time, I think, dissecting this. There's a lot of complication here, and that's what we'll be doing in the next week and days to come.
Well, yeah, we've got 200 pages worth of OBR to go through, and we've got all of these policies to analyse. In the meantime, all of that analysis and all latest reaction will be on the Telegraph website and on our blogs. But thank you very much for joining us for a bit of budget analysis.